most of my life, I've struggled with keeping on a little bit too much body fat, at least enough to be uncomfortable with how my physique looks. And I know a lot of other people struggle with this. And I mean, it gets tiring constantly having to go through the whole winter bulk, bear mode, get a little bit too fat for what we like, and then just to cut again. And then this endless cycle. And, a lot of, fitness influencers will preach about how, like, you're going to gain body fat. You're going to have to just eat until, you can't eat anymore. And I think there's a better approach. And so for me, this video is my framework that I use in order to be able to stay lean year round, even while bulking. And there is a strategy for it. And to be honest, there are some things that can be annoying at first, but once you learn this, you have this skill for the rest of your life. And it becomes automatic to be able to stay lean year round around the clock. And you don't ever have to try to prep to get that beach bod every single year. So when it comes to staying lean year round, we have to understand there's a few different phases that we are going to have to go through in order to achieve this consistent cycle of staying lean while also building muscle. So you'll notice in these pictures how on the far left, I was basically around probably 207, 206, 207, into the middle where I got down to about 197, 198. And then back over on the far right where I'm back up to about 202-ish. But all of a sudden, there's about 3 to 4 pounds difference between the first picture and the one on the far right, yet there's a pretty significant difference in body composition. If you struggle to gain too much fat when you're in a caloric surplus, or maybe you're just looking to recomp in a more effective way so you can stay lean all the time, this framework and strategy is going to benefit you a lot. Now, like I said, it's going to take work. It might be annoying at first, but once you get this down, you have a skill for the rest of your life. So this is for somebody that you gain too much fat on a bulk, or you gain fat too quickly whenever you come out of a cutting phase, or maybe you want to recomp and stay that way, and you want to stop needing to get beach ready year over year. So this is a lifestyle change and a pretty incredible one, if you ask me. So first we have to understand we're going to have to keep track, and this is going to get really meticulous at first, especially because smart bulking can be harder than a fat loss phase. It's super easy to continue to take calories out, but in my opinion, it's harder to smartly add calories back in, and usually, from my opinion, requires a little bit more discipline to do so. So all of this, it's about being slow and steady and requires a ton of patience, and there's not really another way around it. So if you're expecting something super easy or something that's not going to take a lot of work, this strategy just isn't for you. But this strategy is for somebody that is willing to make the necessary changes in order to get the long-term result. Because like I said, once you learn this stuff becomes a damn cakewalk. And so the other thing is the weight scale is your best friend in terms of your weekly averages and knowing when you need to adjust certain things. It's not meant to get attached to, but it is meant to constantly be looking and monitoring how your body is responding to the things that you're putting in. So first, we need to break it down into a timeline. So every year you're going to have 2 bulking phases and 2 cutting phases. Bulking phases are going to be anywhere from 16 to 20 weeks, whereas your fat loss phases are going to be anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. When you're bulking, the goal is about half a pound per week tops. And so what you want to do is do about 100 to 2 calories above your maintenance at the time. And this ensures that you're not gaining too much body fat. Because if you do what a lot of common advice is, which is, just 500 calorie, surplus, that might work for people that may have a faster metabolism or are more genetically predisposed to not hold on to as much body fat. But if you're somebody like me and you tend to hold on to a decent amount of body fat, then if you add 500 calories a week, you're basically adding a pound to your body weight every week. And by the end of 12 weeks, I would argue 10 pounds of that is probably body fat. And that's what we're trying to eliminate in order to stay lean year round. So, and then in a fat loss phase, you can do about 500 to a 750 calorie deficit. That's about a pound to a pound and a half a week. Once you start getting up higher to the steeper deficits, It's fine if you have a decent amount of body fat, but once you get to lower amounts of body fat, usually about, I would just say, just for a rough estimate, 13 to 15%, that can start to eat away at muscle. So we just want to keep that in mind and understand that we're going to be doing this for about 8 to 12 weeks. But once we consistently are in this cycle, your fat loss phases shouldn't be that long. It should just be to shed off kind of the stuff that you've got to show the new muscle that you've put on. And this also ensures that you're going to keep the muscle that you've worked really hard for. So, like I said, these two pictures are only about a 4-pound difference. However, it's a pretty drastic change as far as body composition goes. And the key to it is smart transitions from one phase to the next. So what most people do when they go from a cut back into a bulk is they immediately go back into their bulking calories off of what their old maintenance was. But your old maintenance calories are going to be a bulk after a cut. And this is because of metabolic adaptation. Your body's metabolism slows down over time during a cutting phase because the body seeks homeostasis. And since the body seeks balance, it's going to lower its metabolism in order to conserve as much energy as possible. So when we transition from a cut back into a bulk, what we need to do instead is start by adding about 50 to 100 calories per week over the course of a month and see how your body responds. Because what happens when you're in a cutting phase, your body is essentially in, for lack of a better term, starvation mode in terms of it's trying to hold on to as much as it can. And because of that, it is expecting not to get as many calories as it once did. So when you introduce, a lot of calories back in right off the jump, it's going to store a lot of that as body fat because your metabolic rate is down. Your body's essentially like, oh crap, we might not get this food anymore. So we need to actually store as much of this as possible so that we can conserve and have energy for later on. So we want to start with smart and small increases in calories per week, 50 to 100. And the goal is also to keep your meals the exact same. Throughout all of this process, we want to make sure that our meals are staying the same because it makes it easier to transition from one to the next. All it takes is maybe, half a serving more of rice here and there. And so it basically takes out a lot of guesswork. It takes out a lot of decision making that you have to make and ultimately makes it easier. Now, when transitioning from a bulk to a cut, I also usually recommend starting with about a 200 and 250 calorie deficit. And then over time, you can increase that deficit as you see how your body responds, because you also don't want to cut calories immediately and be insatiably hungry all the time. Because if you get too hungry off the bat, for me anyway, it just led to more emotional eating. I tended to binge more. So it's more so about these gradual changes to let your body get acclimated to the new phase that you're going in. And so this brings me to my next point. What if I have a slow metabolism? If you have a slower metabolism and you can't cut calories because you will be miserable if you cut those calories too low, then I recommend 45 minutes of total walking a day. I break it up 20 minutes of cardio post-workout and then 25 minutes at other places throughout the day, usually about 10 to 15 minute walks after 2 of my meals. So the reason I say slower metabolism is because if you go to most macronutrient calculators and put in how much you're working out or whatever, for me anyway, it said my maintenance was 3,000 calories based on my size, the amount of muscle I have, and how active I am. However, my actual maintenance calories was only 2,500. So if I would have been eating at the 3,000 that the thing prescribed, I would have actually been in a bulk and put on more body fat. And this is also the importance of even tracking stuff for a period of time while you're in maintenance to see if your body actually responds to that. So whether that's tracking the food and weight or just tracking your weight based on your eating habits, if your metabolism is slower than what all these macronutrient calculators are anticipating, then maybe start with a very slight deficit. So for instance, for me, I did a 250 calorie deficit and then added the walking and increased activity. So one, I just had better, digestion because my body was just actually using the stuff on the walks. Two, I didn't hate myself because my deficit wasn't too steep. And if I go below 2,000 calories, it's really hard for me to stick to something just because of how absolutely hungry I am, especially if I'm not going into a bodybuilding prep or something. I don't see a point. And I think most people would benefit from just increasing activities first anyway before doing a caloric deficit. Because whenever you do a caloric deficit, especially a steep one, you have to think not only are you subtracting something, but you also have to add in the fact that you have to have willpower to continue to not eat things. So you're actually adding multiple things onto your plate that you have to accomplish, when in reality, if you just started with upping your activity, if you haven't already done so, that's just one thing to add in. So basically, you want to try to think about this. What is the simplest things that I can add in that would give me results? Especially if your metabolism is lower, you would probably benefit from more activity rather than immediately cutting calories and thus having less energy. So what about our training? So most people, I generally prescribe an upper, lower, or a full body split. And this is because you can train each muscle group at least 2 times a week. And the goal is, when you're training, you just want to increase reps each week until you hit the top end of a rep range, and then add weight once you hit the top end of the rep range, and then repeat. So as far as your sets and reps, 8 to 12 sets per muscle group per week. And then, take sets to failure or 1 rep short of failure in that 8 to 12 rep range. This is very general. Obviously, if you respond better to other things, then that might be, the best option for you. But regardless, you're training, you need to train like you're trying to grow muscle at all times, because you also want to be able to maintain the muscle. And whenever you're in a deficit, that is what is going to keep that muscle on you. And especially, the earlier you are in your training career, you might even gain muscle at the beginning in a deficit. So with that being said, just make sure that you're doing, 2 to 3 sets per muscle group per week, 8 to 12 sets or 8 to 12 reps, pretty close to failure, either at failure or 1 rep shy. Just don't let your technique break down. And so my favorite apps personally for training and nutrition, I love the Hypertrophy Coach app from Joe Bennett. It has a lot of great templates on there. I've learned a lot from him also. Like, he has a bunch of educational stuff on there that you actually get with the app. And then my favorite nutrition app is Macro Factor. It's by far the best I've ever used. It even has a food label scanner. So even if, I know on a lot of apps, especially nutrition apps, you can scan the barcode, but it doesn't necessarily always have all the food. And the food label scanner prevents that. And it also kind of has a built-in coach in there, so it will adjust your calories automatically based on the scale weight that you're putting in on a day-to-day basis and based on the goals that it gives you. So for me, for instance, when I started my cut, it put me at 2,500 calories. It noticed that I wasn't losing weight or might have even been gaining a little bit, and adjusted calories on a week-to-week basis to where I finally found my sweet spot. Same thing for a bulk. It'll add, 50 to 100 calories per week. It'll divvy it up evenly. Or it'll even, on your non-training days, it'll give you less calories and will give you more calories on your training days. But I'm not sponsored by either of these because I'm not important enough. But by far the best, my personal favorite apps that I've used for training as well as nutrition, I think Macro Factor is a plus. I want to say it's like $11.99 a month or something. Totally worth it though. So that is my basic framework that I use to stay lean year round. I hope it helped. If it did, leave a comment. If you have any other questions about it, leave a comment. Always happy to answer. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments. I can do Q&As on stuff. But other than that, I do plan on wanting anyway to start a community around these types of things. So you can basically make better educated training decisions. So you can learn to ask better questions. Because a lot of advice out there is super black and white. And in my opinion, it doesn't help anybody because there's always certain levels of nuance to things. And I would like to have a community of people that can kind of interact, help each other out, and essentially not demonize somebody because they prefer a different training style or because they believe different things, but learning to work with people where they're at. And then over time, hopefully create something big that helps, thousands of people. So I know at the beginning it'll be free. Over time, to be honest with you, my plan is to charge if it even ever actually gets to that point. Hell, I don't know, but I would love to hear in the comments if that would be beneficial to some people. But other than that, Until next time, peace.